I guess it's still morning. So good morning. I'm Congressman Jimmy Gomez, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. This morning, I kicked off the first ever National Summit on the Housing Affordability Crisis, where I brought together lawmakers, advocates, labor, industry, and community leaders all under one roof, with the conversations moderated by co-chairs of caucuses focused on housing. This summit isn't just a conversation, it's a working session. Our 5 panels are tackling the housing crisis from every angle, piece by piece, from building more homes to protecting renters to combating homelessness. Each panel brings together leaders who are putting their piece of the puzzle on the table, and together we're building a national housing agenda. This afternoon, we continue that work here, bringing together Democratic leaders from across the caucuses to speak with one voice. Because the reality is this: housing costs have reached a breaking point for families across the country. Rents are skyrocketing. Home ownership is slipping out of reach for a whole segment and a whole generation of our population. And too many people, our neighbors, are falling into homelessness. I see it through the sons of my son, Hodge, who just turned 3. And he's too young to understand the crisis he is facing or his generation will inherit if we don't do anything about it. The unaffordability, the uncertainty, the hopelessness so many people feel today, especially amongst the young. And I ask myself, if this is what it's like now, what is it going to be like if we don't do anything about it? Since 2019, the average cost of a home in the United States has risen 60%. Half of all renters are rent burdened, a historic high, and over 700,000 people are experiencing homelessness every single night. These are not problems that will be solved on their own. They demand bold and cohesive action. And that's why I brought together these Democratic leaders. Together, we are laying the groundwork for a comprehensive national housing agenda, one that looks to the future, one that matches the scale of this crisis. Our message is clear. We will lower costs, protect renters, build more housing that families could actually afford to buy, and we will tackle the homelessness crisis head on. The American people deserve nothing less. And today is just the beginning of a new path forward for housing in this country. And we understand this. In order to get this done, we need everybody at the table. And one of the people that understands that more than anybody else is our Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, who has made it a priority to tackle the affordability crisis head on, and that housing is part of that problem. With that, let's give it up to Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Well, good morning, everyone. Let me thank Congressman Jimmy Gomez for his tremendous leadership in convening this national summit on the housing affordability crisis. It's an urgent matter that requires an urgent response, and that response is being led in such a significant and comprehensive way by Congressman Gomez and these distinguished leaders within the House Democratic Caucus, Brad and Brittany and Greg, all of whom are focused like a laser beam on addressing the high cost of living in the United States of America. This country is far too expensive. Housing costs are too high, grocery costs are too high, child care costs are too high, utility costs are too high, and health care costs are too high. America is too expensive. And the thing that is burdening everyday Americans the most is the high cost of housing, both rent and the lack of an ability to afford home ownership. At the center of the American dream has always been the ability to purchase a home and raise your children and your family in a comfortable, safe, affordable environment. That American dream is slipping away for many reasons, but particularly threatening to that ability to live the great American dream is the housing affordability crisis. Democrats are going to tackle it decisively. We will work hard during this all-hands-on-deck moment to make housing more affordable in this country, to reopen home ownership for everyday Americans, to tackle homelessness, and to address the fact that far too many Americans can't afford the rent because the rent is too damn high. Donald Trump and House Republicans promised that they would lower housing costs and the cost of living on day one. They have failed. They haven't even tried to address the high cost of living. Costs aren't going down, they are going up. Housing costs are skyrocketing through the roof. And Republican bills, including the one big ugly bill that is now law, represents an attack on the ability to afford to purchase a home, and an attack on the ability to pay your rent. So I'm thankful for the leadership that these distinguished members of Congress, led by Jimmy, are providing. And I can say without equivocation that the House Democratic Caucus stands squarely and unequivocally behind this effort to drive down the high cost of housing in the United States of America and bring the American dream to life for this generation of Americans and generations to come. It's now my honor, I think, is that right? To yield to the distinguished chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and a champion on this issue, Congressman Greg Casar.
Appreciate it. Thank you, man. Thank you, Leader Jeffries, for making housing affordability a real pillar of what this Democratic caucus stands for. Thank you, Congressman Gomez, for this incredible work that we need so badly if we want to retake the majority and win back voters' trust. And I'm proud to be joined here by other leaders in the Democratic caucus. I represent the heart of Texas in Congress. I'm chair of the Progressive Caucus, but perhaps most relevant today is actually my experience right before being in Congress as chair of the Austin City Council's Housing, Planning, and Zoning Committee. And I am proud that Austin is now a poster child and a model of how we can start to make housing more affordable in this country, because housing costs had been skyrocketing for years in Austin, but then we took critical steps to make it more easy to build housing. We invested in affordable housing. We worked with tenants and with unions to make sure everyone benefited from the construction of new housing. And as a result, Austin is now one of the only cities in this country where jobs are going up, but the rent is coming down. And although we are the 11th biggest city in America, we are the #1 builder of affordable housing in the United States of America. And while housing costs remain too high in Austin, we know that bringing them down is finally bringing them in the right direction, and that we have a responsibility to bring that model to cities and towns all over America, because Austin should not be the exception to the American story right now. We need to acknowledge that something has got ignored in Washington, D.C. for far too long, which is the housing crisis that everyday Americans face. For far too many people, especially folks in my generation, the cost of rent makes it impossible to get ahead, and the idea of owning a home is constantly out of reach. Like most crises, this crisis has several causes. We've made it too hard to build new housing in the United States of America. We have invested too little in affordable housing, and we have invested too little in helping people afford the housing that we have. And we have allowed hedge funds and big corporations to buy up too much of our housing and jack up our prices. The Democratic Party needs to be the party, again, of everyday working people that has solutions, and Democrats will be putting forward, alongside Congressman Gomez, proposals that will make sure that working class Americans know that we stand with them to make sure they have a place to afford to live in this country. This is not time to nibble around the edges. We're going to bring big ideals to the table to tackle this big crisis. What we did in Austin is not a miracle. It was a choice. We can and must invest in people who are looking to afford their housing so that the folks that work so hard in America can afford a decent place to live. Thank you all very much. And this issue of bringing down the cost of housing is one that actually brings together all parts of our Democratic family. It is not center or left or right to talk to people about bringing down the cost of their housing. It's the number one thing that I hear from constituents at their doors that we talk too little about here on the Hill. And so this is really an issue that brings together the New Democrats, the Blue Dogs, Progressive Caucus. And so I'm proud to call up my partner here, the New Democrat Coalition Chair, Congressman Brad Schneider.
Greg, thank you. And I want to specifically thank my Ways and Means colleague, Representative Gomez, for his leadership in bringing together us here today, but also this program throughout the day. I want to thank Leader Jeffries, who have united Democrats on this issue that affects every single American. Access to affordable housing in vibrant neighborhoods and strong communities is literally the bedrock of the American dream. So we should all be concerned by a headline in Axios yesterday that I think reflects the state of housing in our nation right now. Quote, "Belief in the American dream hits record low." A new Wall Street Journal NORC poll finds that almost 70% of U.S. adults think that the American dream, or the idea that hard work pays off, doesn't hold true in 2025. And 56% said that they had little or no confidence that they could buy a home if they wanted to. Right now, the vast majority of Americans no longer believe that their kids will be better off than they are. Think about that for a second. For virtually our entire history as a nation, almost 250 years, we have held dear to the idea that every generation would build on the successes of prior generations for a better, brighter future. But today, most Americans don't believe that is true. This is totally unacceptable and is the clarion call that brings us all here united together. We need to make achieving the American dream more accessible, more affordable, and a reality for many, many more, for every American family, for every American child. I'm proud to lead the New Democrat Coalition. With 115 members, we are the largest ideological caucus in the House. We represent the ideological center and the majority of the Democratic caucus. But our entire caucus is together. New Dems are laser focused on crafting ideas that will help working families not just get by, but get ahead. Building a healthier, safer community, building communities across the nations that secure the promise of the American dream for all Americans. The New Dem Housing Task Force has been putting their heads together on how to make affording a home a reality for more Americans. Our housing affordability agenda lays out how Americans can build more homes and get them to the market quickly. Make it easier to own or rent a home. Improve housing data and transparency so we can surge our resources in the communities that need them the most. We're also focused on preventing discrimination in housing, countering the efforts of Republicans to gut fair housing programs, and slashing efforts that protect affordable housing. Keep an eye out for more news on our housing affordability agenda. The bottom line is this: having a place you call home, being part of a healthy, vibrant, and safe community, securing the future for yourself and your family should be a reality for all Americans, not a dream that seems out of reach. Home is where we celebrate our kids' birthdays. We build friendships with our neighbors. It's where we hope to grow old and be surrounded by loved ones. I am proud to join this group in front of you today to set a pathway towards making more affordable homes for more Americans. Americans are crying out for help. We are here to answer the call. I'm now pleased to turn it over to my dear friend and chair of the Yes in My Backyard and Real Estate Caucus, co-chair, Brittany Pettersen.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you all for being here to cover this incredibly important topic. I represent a district in Colorado, and I always say the secret's out. It's the best place to live. We have had tens of thousands of people moving there every month consistently for years, and it has pushed so many people who have grown up in these communities who are no longer able to live in our state. We're actually seeing for the first time that people are leaving our state because of how unaffordable it is to put a roof over their head. I want to highlight some of the gaps nationally we face. The U.S. shortage is 4.5 million homes that we're short right now to meet the current need. And Colorado, unfortunately, is ranked second for the worst state for affordability and access to housing. And that's why when I was first on the campaign trail talking to constituents about the issues that they are most concerned about, when they talked, number one thing that came up, the biggest pain point is around the housing crisis. And that's why I asked to be on the Financial Services Committee, on the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, and why I'm part of these two very important caucuses to identify what we can do at the federal level to incentivize and streamline the process for permitting locally, and also how we create and increase the opportunity for people to buy a home, to increase their financial stability, even have something to pass on to the next generation. I think that Brad did a great job at highlighting what the younger generation feels like right now, where they are graduating with a mountain of student loan debt. They are, far too many are stuck living in the home that they grew up because they can't afford rent, and they don't have hope that ever one day in the future that they'll buy a home. That is a huge issue for us as a nation. When our young people don't have hope, when they're not bought into our long-term economic success, and when they aren't able to make that very important step in home ownership that brings that financial stability over time, that's a problem for all of us. Far too many people right now are competing with corporations buying up single-family homes for rentals instead of being able to own it for their long-term stability and success. And that American dream has become further and further out of reach. When I think about in Colorado, the seniors who want a place to move to, but there are no options for them to go. They're unable to move, to open up the home for the next generation to move in. It creates a domino effect. And we have failed as a nation at investing in the supply that is needed right now. We are decades behind. We are facing, having gone through the mortgage crisis, the first housing crisis. We saw home builders go out of business at a skyrocketing rate, and we never recovered even from that. On top of the fact that we have not invested at a national level in the ways that we needed to since the 80s and 90s. So we have not kept pace with the need. And by the way, we are not creating opportunities for people to work here to meet our needs to build new homes. We're actually deporting folks, increasing the costs, as well as the tariffs and the implications, the costs for our construction companies for the increase in their materials. So we're seeing skyrocketing costs for actually building homes. But another thing that I want to highlight that I know will be part of the conversation for this very important summit is around the insurance costs for our houses. I live in Colorado. We have skyrocketing rates in some of the areas because of hail damage, because of wildfire risk. With the changing climate, we know that so many people are unable to afford their home insurance, and this is going to also be a key priority for us. We want to bring our proactive agenda. I think so many Americans are thirsty to see what we stand for and what we are going to do to solve the issues that face them, their everyday lives, and housing will be a top priority for us. It is a top priority and will continue to be when we have the opportunity to get this done. So thank you all for being here to cover this critical issue, and I want to thank again Representative Gomez for bringing us together, and we are going to go to the Public Housing Caucus co-chair, Representative Torres.
Thank you, Brittany. First, I want to thank Congressman Gomez for his leadership in shining a spotlight on the human toll of the affordability crisis, which to me is not an abstraction. It's something that I've lived in my own life as a product of public housing. 2025 marks the 90th anniversary of the first public housing development, first houses in New York City, owned and operated by the New York City Housing Authority. NYCHA is the largest provider of affordable housing in the country. And I would be homeless. My family would have been homeless were it not for public housing. And my story is not unique. There are millions of people who would be on the streets were it not for programs like Section 8 and public housing and the whole range of affordable housing programs that we fund at the federal level. You know, public housing has been so systematically starved of federal funding that it has a capital need of $80 billion and counting. There are children who have been poisoned by lead in their own homes because of federal disinvestment. There are asthmatics who are struggling to breathe in their own homes in the face of molded and leaking conditions because of federal disinvestment. There are senior citizens who are freezing in their homes during the cold of winter with their boilers breaking down because of federal disinvestment. There are disabled people who are stranded, who are prisoners in their top floor apartments with their elevators broken down because of federal disinvestment. Public housing is a federal obligation, and it's fair to say the federal government has been the worst slumlord in the United States, and it's about to become worse under Donald Trump. Now, HUD's budget is a mere 1% of the overall federal budget. Even though housing is central to all of our lives, only 1% of the federal budget goes to housing. And Donald Trump is proposing not only to cut that 1% in half, but to impose time limits on programs like public housing and Section 8, which will lead to the dislocation and the displacement of millions of people who depend on housing for their housing stability. In America, we have an arsonist pretending to be a firefighter in the White House. Now, I have the honor of representing the Bronx, which I think of as the essential county of America. It is home to essential workers, and during COVID, we saw essential workers who are often paid poverty wages put their lives at risk on the front lines while the rest of America and while America's largest city was largely sheltering in place. And the cruelest irony of our time is that America has become unaffordable to its own essential workforce. The median income in the Bronx is less than a third of the income that you would need to afford the median rent in New York City. Out of 3,000 counties in America, there is not a single county, where an essential worker earning minimum wage could afford a 2-bedroom apartment, not one. Right? The American promise is supposed to be that if you work hard and play by the rules, then you will have not a handout, but a fighting chance at a decent life. There are people who are working hard, who are playing by the rules, and who have been deprived of a decent life, who are working poor or even working homeless. And so the broken promise can only be repaired by delivering opportunity and affordability to all Americans. Housing is not simply one good among many. It's the foundation on which all of us build a better life for ourselves and for our families. And I would ask all of my colleagues in Congress to practice the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We should want for every American family the same housing opportunity and housing stability that we would insist upon for the people we love. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritchie. I think one of the things that all these representatives have touched upon is the housing crisis is more than just one of lack of physical space. It's a crisis of confidence that the American system itself is working. And that's what you see poll after poll that's starting to express how people feel that no matter how hard they work, they can't get ahead, and that the next generation, their kids, will not be better off than themselves. That is a problem because then we have a lot of instability throughout the country. And that instability causes reaching for extreme solutions. In my district, and I think I can say it's at one of the epicenters of the housing crisis, 20% of my district believes we should burn down the entire system and start over. 20%. And that's because I think they don't believe that no matter what they do, that they'll ever get ahead, that they'll be able to live the life that they've been told they can achieve if they go to school, get a job, and able to raise a family. With that, I'd love to open it up to some questions that anyone can take.
Thank you, Congressman. As you are putting forward this summit, Republicans are reportedly rebranding the reconciliation law that they passed this summer as the Working Families Tax Cut Bill. As you make your case to the constituents, to voters about the work that Democrats are doing on this issue and other issues that pertain to the affordability crisis, do you believe that what Republicans have done with this bill and them constantly looking to rebrand it and shape-shift it makes it easier for you all to show voters and show constituents that you all are the folks who can actually solve this crisis?
Absolutely. First, let me kind of say they're trying to brand it because it is so bad, that piece of legislation, that it was a direct attack on working people, cutting their health care, cutting programs that they rely on like SNAP, that it was actually making things worse, all just to give tax breaks to the largest corporations and the wealthiest people in this country. And they know that, and they see when they go to the grocery store every single day, when they are trying to pay their rent, when they're trying to pay their utilities, the prices keep going up, up, and up. And that they haven't delivered on the affordability. Things are actually getting worse. And if we're going to actually tackle this affordability crisis that Trump said he was going to tackle on day one, we have to start with housing because that is what impacts people throughout. This is not just a blue state issue. It is also a red state issue. We hear more and more Republicans talk about it, but then take no concrete steps to actually fix it. So we're going to start laying out an agenda that are being put together across the Democratic Caucus led by Hakeem Jeffries. Reduce cost of living, create opportunities to go to college or start a small business and save for retirement, and then have the kind of investment that meets the need. Right now, everything we've done has been too small, too slow, and too expensive. We got to think different. Brad?
I want to add something. Thanks for the question. And you can try to rebrand something as much as you want. It doesn't change the simple facts, as Representative Gomez touched on, that the one big bad bill is making life more expensive for working families in the country. It's going to take health care away from tens of millions of people. It's going to take $500 billion out of Medicare. What I was looking for, I just happen to have, as kids are going back to school this month and last month, the prices are up because of the president's tariffs, tax on working families. Notepads up by 7%. The big one here, index cards up by 43%. Lunch boxes are going to cost 10% more. The supplies kids need to go to school, learn the lessons to succeed and get ahead is costing families more. Rather than, as Representative Torres said, rather than making the investment in improving the housing stock in this country, this administration, the president, and the Republicans supporting him are working to cut investment in public housing, making it harder for people to put a roof over their head to provide for their families. So Democrats, why we stand here in front of you right now, we are united in saying that we need to bring down the cost for families in America. It's not that America is too expensive. It's living in America, getting ahead in America is too hard, too difficult, too expensive. And we've got to bring down the cost of living for working families. That's what we're doing. The Republicans can try to rebrand their bill, but the facts of their bill remain the same. They're not taking steps to make life easier for working families.
For me, the rebranding is a euphemism for deceptive advertising. And the so-called big, beautiful bill is the most regressive piece of legislation in the history of our country because it essentially cuts Medicare and SNAP, healthcare and food, the essentials of life for working people by $1 trillion in order to fund tax cuts for the top 1% who have 12 times more wealth than the bottom 60%. Right? I cannot imagine a more regressive piece of legislation. And I have constituents who, after paying all their bills, paying the rent, paying utilities, are living on $20 a day. And so Republicans are cutting health care and food for those living on $20 a day in order to fund tax cuts for the likes of Elon Musk, who has a net worth of $400 billion. In what universe does that qualify as a working class tax cut?
I haven't actually heard about the name that they were going to call it, so thanks for bringing that to my attention. What a joke. And, Donald Trump continues to think that he can con his way, as he has in the past, and make voters say something that is wildly different from reality. Even though he's a con man, he's not going to be able to con his way out of the implications of this bill. And they know that. That's why so many of the impacts are going to hit after the midterm elections. And they're trying to change the name because it is deeply unpopular out in the world, as we've gone out to tell our voters about what they just passed and what's going to happen in our communities. And most of us were in our districts, meeting with people, holding town halls, visiting nursing homes, visiting our healthcare centers, our hospitals. This is the largest transfer of wealth from working class families to the most wealthy in the history of the United States, to the wealthiest people in the world in the history of the world. And so when they try to rebrand this, people are going to feel the pain. They're already feeling the economic pain of the tariffs, the instability in the market, the fact that we've seen our job growth stagnate after we've exponentially increased our job growth and our economic prosperity here and our recovery from the global pandemic. So they are not going to be able to lie their way out of the pain and suffering that is going to hit every person throughout this country who is not a millionaire or a billionaire.
Here and here.
Thank you, Congressman. The Republicans have also made their own arguments for what housing policy should look like. Can we just hear some reaction from you all on what you think of the administration's arguments that, for instance, deporting millions of people or increasing energy production or arresting homeless people would be a productive way of addressing the housing crisis? How do Democrats respond to the Republicans' messaging on policies like that?
First, going after the people that are actually building the housing is counterproductive, right? Because you still need physical bodies to build the housing that is out there. There was even some, during the conference today, from somebody who I'm pretty sure is a Republican, mentioned that we need a workforce that can build the housing that we need. If we're going to build 1 million units of housing on top of what's already naturally getting built per year for 10 years, you're going to need a lot more people. So deporting the people that are doing the hard work and destroying communities is not going to get the job done. It's actually going to make things a lot worse. And the reason why is a lot of these folks live in mixed status families. They have U.S. born children. They have spouses that are legal permanent residents. So thinking that they're going to deport their way out of this problem is fantasy. And it's also undermines communities across the country. That's not going to happen. But there are stuff that some Republicans, I'm working on with a Republican on a bill that's pragmatic to convert commercial and office space to housing. Those are real ideas. If there are Republicans who want to work on this issue that have real ideas that are going to build more units and keep people in their homes, we're happy to do that. But thinking that they're going to solve this problem by deporting people out of the country is complete fantasy and is cruel and counterproductive.
Look, the solution to homelessness is a home. Homelessness is solved not by arresting homeless people, but by housing them. And I support programs like supportive housing, which provides services to those with severe mental illness, because supportive housing is not only good morals, it's good economics. It's a much more cost-effective alternative to emergency hospitalization, psychiatric hospitalizations, or street homelessness, or incarceration. Like, homelessness and housing insecurity have a cost. And we feel that it's much more cost-effective and more humane for the federal government to invest in affordable housing than to pay the social cost of homelessness and widespread housing insecurity.
How out of touch can you be to think that you can arrest your way out of the homeless crisis that we're facing throughout the country? Both my parents faced homelessness. It's not because they were insistent on breaking the law, they had no options. They had nowhere to go. We actually addressed those challenges by providing that upfront cost to get people into a rental home, to make sure that we're funding Section 8. My mom wouldn't be alive today if she wasn't one of the lucky ones who qualified for a Section 8 voucher. When I think about these are people who are so out of touch with the realities that people are facing that are I apologize. I have allergies, not COVID.
You're allergic to the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, I'm allergic to the big, beautiful bill. Yeah, maybe it's just being in Washington, right? But when I think about how out of touch these proposals are and their lack of experience with any of these issues, their lack of talking to people who are experiencing this, actually understanding from the experts what we need to do to solve this, it is wild, the sheltered lives that they have lived, to think that this is an approach that works in any way. When I was in the district, talking to people in nursing homes who rely on Medicaid funding, who rely on HUD vouchers. By the way, Trump is going to decimate it almost in half, our HUD funding, our voucher program, to decimate Section 8 housing. The people who are the most vulnerable, the minimal amount of safety nets that we have in this country that are now on the chopping block, and what that looks like for our seniors who could be out, seniors who have disabilities, who will be left with nowhere to go but on the street. Out of all the people that I talked to in my nursing home visit, there was one person who said that they had a family member that they could go to, even though it would be very difficult. But all of them said that they would be on the street and left to die. That is their proposals, the way that they are approaching addressing the housing crisis. And it's inhumane and it's more expensive for all of us in the long term.
Go ahead.
And then there's been on this stage a wide range of regional and ideological diversity. Democrats have already offered some, solutions for plans to build more housing. Others have offered, solutions like rent freezes, for instance. How do you all plan to reach a consensus just within the caucus for a national plan for this, given the different places that you all come from, both ideologically and literally from different cities and places with different challenges?
Well, first you got to acknowledge there's a problem, and that's what everybody's doing, is acknowledging that there is a crisis that impacts every type of community. And then if you look at the polling, the people that think that there's problems are folks with college degrees, no college degrees, people who are in cities versus in rural areas, people that are young and old. So there is a consensus emerging. Additionally, we have to build more. And one of the things that we're going to have to do is continues to have this conversation and decide how much we're going to invest and if it's going to continue to be at the top of a legislative agenda. In the struggle, when you pass, like I think Ritchie was here during Build Back Better, it was housing that got cut out in the Senate. So we're trying to make it so that when the next time we take the majority, that housing doesn't end up on the cutting room floor. But there is more agreement than you would think. Brad Schneider and Greg Casar might not always see the solutions the same, but they know that we got to build our way out of this problem as well. And then Ritchie, he talks about public housing, because no matter what we do, people are going to be living in the housing that we built years ago in my district and his district across the country. That has to be invested in. So that consensus is emerging, but in the end, it depends on how much we can actually get. I would like to, it just doesn't get on the cutting room floor during the next big piece of legislative fight. Do you want to add anything?
I actually feel like your legislation on office to residential conversions might actually be one of the best opportunities for bipartisanship. LIHTC historically has drawn bipartisan support, and it funds 90% of new affordable rental housing. So there's bipartisan agreement around housing innovation, modular housing. So there is opportunities. The question is, are we going to prioritize it? The Democrats prioritize housing, Republicans not so much. But the affordability crisis has spiraled so far out of control that we can no longer afford to ignore it. And keep in mind, the inflation crisis in America is disproportionately a housing inflation crisis.
Yeah. I want to add really quick, Jimmy, one one bill that we're working on is to provide the upfront funding for every state to come up with their housing plan and to identify their needs. When you have, it's going to take the federal, state, and local governments working together to identify the gaps in their own states, bringing the financial incentives for the private investors, for the developers, also the upfront costs, the upfront investments from the federal government, and trying to meet those unique population needs. In Colorado, I already hit on this a little bit, but we have very few options for senior housing, and it's a huge problem for everybody, for our seniors and everybody coming behind them. So how are we meeting those specific population needs? How are we working with states to identify those gaps and making sure that developers are building the types of homes that we need, and that they're actually making a profit, and that we're bringing those financial incentives? Because what we're seeing is that many of the housing developments are not attainable, they're not affordable, but it's because if you're going to make the upfront cost, the time, it has to be worth it in the profit that you're making. And so we need to play a part at the federal level. We also need to invest in new types of technology. I visited in Chaffee County the first 3D printed home in Colorado. And what are we doing to incentivize on new technology, also reducing costs to make sure that we're building resilient homes, as we've seen an increase in hail damage across the country that has brought skyrocketing costs for insurance.
Brittany Pettersen with Punchbowl News. I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the action we've seen in the Senate. The Senate has historically been an obstacle to federal housing policy, but the Senate Banking Committee put together a big bipartisan housing bill called the Road to Housing last month. I wanted to see if you guys have any reaction to that, as well as like the scope of the bill. It's a lot of small to mid-sized changes to housing, just throwing a lot of them at the housing system. How do you guys feel about that approach and lessons to be taken from the Senate?
I think first, them just taking a big kind of swing or a bunt swing, I guess, at the problem is at least it shows that they know that they have a problem they want to address. The keynote speaker for the summit was Ruben Gallego, who sits on the committee, on the finance committee in the Senate. And one of the things he was stressing is that, in California, we need to deal with some of the regulatory issues, which we all agree that the state legislature and the governor have tried to address. And when I was there, I was trying to address it, but it took them kind of years to get that to a point. He mentioned something regarding they're kind of boxed in also by federal lands, and how do you deal with that? So I think some of the stuff that we can get done, we should get done. Stuff that doesn't cost money, stuff that will move the ball forward. But if we really want the scale, we're going to have investments in the billions of dollars. I asked, one of the questions I asked, what do we need? And I think how much would we need? The low-income housing tax credit, that expansion included about 15 to 16 billion. That would build about 1.2 million units over the next 10 years. Still too small, right? So that's why it's like Congress is not going to be able to, we're going to play a role, but then a lot of it also has to be done at the local level to streamline a lot of their regulations. If they're choking development, that's still going to impact the supply. Greg Casar mentioned Austin. I want to go visit Austin because it's the only place that I've been able to find that has changed some of their zoning to allow more density to be built, thereby bending the price curve on rents. Only place. But imagine if we were doing that nationwide, where you can bend the price curve on rents. But that means you need supply. So at least they got something done. We'd love to see the House get something done. It wasn't as much as I would like. And the main problem is a lot of times it does end up on the cutting room floor. But it's at least a step forward on the Senate side.
I support I commend the Senate Banking Committee for prioritizing housing to an extent that we have not seen before from the Senate in Washington, D.C. And, I'm proudly pro-abundance, and I see it as a pro-abundance legislation because it's going to remove arbitrary regulatory barriers to creating affordable housing at a time when we have a housing deficit of 7 million units for the lowest income Americans. So it seems to me that housing abundance is neither Democratic nor Republican. It's neither progressive nor conservative. It's simply effective, efficient governance. It's about a government that can build.
And he's absolutely correct. And one of my things is like, if you say you're going to build up a certain amount of units, but it's going to take too long, well, that's a problem. If it's not a big enough investment, that's a problem. If each unit costs $800,000, well, that's a problem.
Or even $1 million in DC.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in LA, 800,000 units of
We might as well buy the home outright.
exactly, or buy them a home somewhere else. That's like, so we have to think differently, and I think it's partly is the Democrats have, I believe, come to grasp the severity of the issue, and that it just creates a lot of economic turmoil, plus turmoil in our political system itself. Did you have a question? Okay.
Kind of building off of that, I guess, is there any sort of bipartisan motion in the House for some sort of large housing package? I know the one in the Senate was pretty historic, now that it's been running over a decade. Is there any wheels turning for that in the House? Can you talk about that?
Well, I have a bill with Mike Carey on the commercial and office real estate. It needs to rise to a higher level, and that's what we're trying to do. I won't be surprised after we have this summit that the Republicans will probably try to do something on their own. Right? This is a competitive business that we're trying to appeal to voters. Once they do that, we will try to develop some kind of joint agenda. It's hard to believe that they will. I mean, remember, they put all their political capital into permanent tax cuts while gutting all these other programs. They had an opportunity just a few months ago, a few weeks ago, and they did some stuff, but they didn't take the whole thing. So we need to try to create that broad coalition between Republicans and Democrats. Are they going to do it? We'll see. I think they're having trouble getting their own people to support keeping the government open. Anything?
Sorry, thank you all. That's all the time we have. If you have any more questions, feel free to talk to members in the hall.
Thank you. I
Thanks,
guess I
everybody.
guess they're pulling the plug on us. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.